Good afternoon. My name is Stacy Brown-Philpott, and I am an entrepreneur in residence at Google Ventures. And I am excited to introduce our guest today from Question Bridge. So Question Bridge started, I guess, the concept back in 1996 when Chris Johnson came up with the idea of unprompted Q&A as a way of getting into the minds and the hearts and the beliefs of the African American community in San Diego. Chris is a filmmaker and is notably known for The Roof is on Fire that he produced with a woman named Suzanne Lacey, and it was aired on Cron TV. And he's gone on to do many other things, but he's currently a professor of photography at the California College of Arts. So Hank found out about what Chris had done and talked to him, I guess, a decade or more than a decade later about this project and proposed the idea of doing something similar for Black males. Hank's work has been exhibited all over the world, and some of the more famous places like the Guggenheim and the Museum of Modern Art. And one of his films along the way was featured at the Sundance Film Festival. So these two great minds thinking about media and art and photography and the Black man have come together into an inspiring project. For the last 4 years, I think it was, they went to 11 cities and spoke with over 150 Black men just to ask questions and hear the answers. And it was unprompted. I think they got about 1,500 conversations out of this project. And the idea was that people would ask a question and someone else would answer that question. Different person, different mind, as a way of bridging the gap between socioeconomic status and also age status. So they've got some interactive things they're going to show us today. I think Chris said it well when he describes this project as an unrehearsed, totally spontaneous expression of the truth. And I'm sure you'll enjoy what they both have to say today. And if you want to see more, you can visit the Oakland Museum, where their exhibit will be on display until July 8th. So please welcome Hank Thomas and Chris Johnson. Thank you.
Well, I'll begin. Thank you very much for being here. I want to say that it's really an honor to be here, and I want to thank Daphne Muse and Ann Farmer for making this possible for us. And as she said, we're here to talk about a project called Question Bridge Black Males, which has a really ambitious goal. What we intend to do with this project is actually change the way people understand the nature of Black male consciousness, which sounds like a lofty goal, but I think you can understand, given the things that are happening in our culture right now and in the news, why that's really important to do. One of the things I hope we get the chance to talk about maybe when we do questions and answers is exactly why would an artist try to take on an issue like that and how to go about it. So what we've done is prepare a little clip to show you just what our methodology is, to give you a sense of what we're doing. And so this is our trailer.
Black man.
Do you want to get out of the situation that you're in?
What is the reluctance for taking responsibility for improving our communities?
Are your children better or worse off as a result of your involvement?
Why wouldn't you be happy with your son being gay?
Why are you so violent?
Why do you have that take mentality?
Why are you afraid of being intelligent?
Why?
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 What I want to know is,
Why?
I believe that we've incorporated a lot of things that are unhealthy to us.
We are supposed to be tough,
I can't let him see no type of sucker.
along with various other stereotypes.
The level of mentorship in our community is not as strong as it possibly could be.
When I came up, crack was a quick way for a black man to make $1 million.
Sometimes I think because we think we're black, we're some other kind of human beings, but we're just like most other human beings.
Why didn't y'all leave us the blueprint?
We did leave you a blueprint.
We just didn't tell you where it was.
That's something that we dropped the ball on.
What do you fear?
That something will harm my children.
I fear success.
Am I the only one
who has problem eating chicken, watermelon, and bananas in front of white people.
Hold on, bro. Y'all niggas crazy.
That word, we have to stop using it.
I think black people can say nigga anytime they want. How dare you? What right do you have to use this word?
A lot of nigga questions for the rapper.
What is common to all of us that we can say makes us who we are?
This is the easiest question in the world to answer.
The thing that we have in common is that we are male and we are black.
All right, my question is, I try to live good, but I'm surrounded by bad. And I want to know what it is I could do to do better and live peaceful, surrounded by all evil. How can I do that?
So what that brief sequence does is give you a sense of what we've tried to do, and that is to take the deceptively simple process of asking a question and put that right into the heart of one of the most pressing and troubling social concerns of our time, and that is the fact that the black community is radically divided from itself, the fact that black men are having to contend with being one of the most opaque and troubled demographics at our time. What we've done is just experiment with the idea that black men not only have really deep questions about all the concerns that affect their lives, but they also have the answers. And putting them together gives us a chance to really understand from the position of privileged witnesses that this conversation is very complex and it unfolds in the installation that we created. But it has a history, as she said, that began with my experience when I was growing up in Brooklyn. This is a slide by the photographer Roy de Carava. And I use this as a way of illustrating the way that I experienced Bed-Stuy when I was growing up as a kid in the 40s and 50s. At that time, the black community was still forced to live in one community by itself. I mean, there were many, many generations and many different socioeconomic classes. I don't want to oversimplify the fact that there was obviously crime and lots of other issues. But what I love about this slide is that it gives a sense of the way I experienced the black community as a child. You see a mother maybe walking her children from school, and that sense of being part of a community that was a whole with all of the issues that were part of it. But then with the passage of the civil rights laws, one of the unintended consequences was there was a split in the community. Those who were able to leave the African American community did. And so this next slide by Bruce Davidson is probably more typical of the way people think of the black community, and it typifies a lot of the problems that we suffer. And so what happened was I left New York when I was 17, came to California. I was very lucky to have mentors that brought me into the photo world. I studied photography with Ansel Adams and Judy Dater and Wynn Bullock and people like that. And I became a professor at the California College of the Arts over the years. And Suzanne Lacy, who's a renowned performance artist, she's really well known for going to communities and trying to assess what the issues and values in that community are. And she and I formed a collaboration that gave us a chance to work with kids like this in high schools. We created a project called The Roof is on Fire. And what we did was take the idea that young kids, if you create a safe environment around them, will reveal truths that they'll withhold from you if they are aware that you are there. So what we did was we put the kids in cars on a rooftop. We got the commission, the rooftop of a parking garage. We put 200 cars with kids in the cars. And we told the kids that they were to use the car as a safe place to talk. And so they had a badge around their necks that said, "Shut up and listen." And that was a way for the audience to create an opportunity to really hear the truth from their points of view. And they talked, as you can imagine, about issues that were passionately important to them. They talked about sex and drugs and values and language. And it was a really animated conversation. But one of the things that inspired the whole process was that they felt as if they were given permission to really be listened to. And you can see in this slide, the woman in the background is performing the generous act of listening to these young people. And it was a really powerful experience. And I think the people who saw it came away with real different insights into what was going on in the lives of these young people. So that project was broadcast on KRON, and I sort of became known in the art world for doing projects like this. And a few years later, I was commissioned by the Museum of Photographic Arts in San Diego to do a project called Republic. And they asked me to do something that related to the black community. And I thought back to that initial experience that I had as a young person of seeing the black community divide into those who made a decision to leave the community to seek opportunities and freedom, which is great. But of course, there's a cost to that. And the one thing that I took away from the initial experience was the fact that listening is a passive form of being very generous. But there's probably a more active way to do that, and that's asking a question. So what I decided to do was give people on both sides of this divide, those who live within inner city working class neighborhoods and those who don't, to ask questions of those on the other side and vice versa. So what you're seeing here is Keona Johnson. She's a woman who lives in the inner city of San Diego, and William Gaines. And so I gave her a chance to ask questions of him and vice versa. So what I'm going to show you is a brief clip of this exchange.
Have you given any thought to where the money comes from for people who are receiving public assistance? And do you care?
I've thought about where public assistance money comes from, and I do care, but for one, I am on public assistance. And it's not because we don't want to work, it's not because we want to sit at home and get a check or anything like that. A lot of people perceive us young teenage mothers to sit at home and just collect a check, where a lot of times we do go out and look for work. We do work. We can't work as long because child care is really up there. At this point in time, I pay $300 a month for one child, and I have two. And I pay $150 a month for another child. The $300 is because my child is under 2. The $150 is because my child is over 2 and is school age. So yes, I know where the money comes from taxpayers. But we do have people who take up American jobs who are not taxpayers because they're not an American citizen. How about that? We get decreases in our checks because we are American citizens, but yet if you're a refugee or you're an immigrant or you're an able working alien, legal working alien in the United States, you get an increase in your check when you come over here from different countries because the United States government have so-called some kind of agreement with them. They come over here and they're able to get grants to start businesses where we are already living here, working, doing the backbone of the country, and we don't get that same type of respect. But yet people look down upon us because we are on public assistance. They like to say, oh, the black teenage moms, they're going out opening their legs and having babies just to get on welfare to get out the house. That is not always the case. It's a small proportion that does that, but you only focus on this small proportion.
So you can imagine what it was like for me to be in the middle of this process and have this kind of really amazing truth-telling just emerge spontaneously from the people who were involved with it. The piece that I put together for the MOPA installation was an hour's worth of really poignant questions and answers that came from the people who were involved. So I knew that somehow or another this process was animating something that these people wanted to share. Where did these incredibly articulate answers come from? So that's how Question Bridge was born. And I had ambitions back in '96 of it maybe becoming an HBO documentary and going on. It turned out not to happen that way. And basically, I sent it around to a bunch of friends. Luckily, one of the friends I sent it to was the mother of Hank Willis Thomas. And so I think Hank will pick up the story from here.
Yeah, so I went to California College of Arts for graduate school when I was a photo major. And I was one of Chris's students. He was my mentor. And along the way, I'd seen the documentary of The Roof is on Fire, but I also saw him do a presentation on Question Bridge. And about 3 years after I graduated, I was offered opportunity to apply for a fellowship from the Tribeca Film Institute for new media. And Around the same time, I came across a VHS that my mother had of the Question Bridge original installation, and it struck me as having so much potential because of the rawness with which the exchange happened. And in fact, one of the things that Chris talked about was that if we had the same people in the same room kind of having a discourse, it'd be a lot more contentious and probably not, people would be less willing to listen to one another. But somehow by mediating a conversation through video, it allows for a deeper way of listening and a more sincere and earnest response. And myself and one of our collaborators, Bayete Ross-Smith, who also went to CCA, were doing a lot of work contending with issues about the limitations of notions of black male identity, especially. And I was really interested in how we could use this question bridge model to speak to what I saw as the diversity within the African American male demographic, which kind of is frequently spoken about in monolithic ways. And so I approached Chris about how we could possibly apply to do a question bridge about black males. And so over and through that, we wound up traveling with Bayete Ross-Smith, and then soon our fourth collaborator, Kamal Sinclair, came on board, and then actors Jesse Williams and Delroy Lindo and my mother came on board as executive producers to kind of help create this team to kind of fulfill this kind of undetermined mission at the time, which soon became this mission to represent and redefine black male identity. But the simplicity of the way the project works has already been expressed, but this is a brief illustration.
My question to the black man in America or anywhere else is, what is common to all of us that we can say makes us who we are?
So we found this person in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and he asked this question, and we then went around and found people to answer the question, and this is just one of the answers.
Our commonality is in our history, but I think our beauty as black people is also in our diversity.
And so at first we thought about just doing this as simple one-to-one. So one person asks a question, another person answers it. One of the real essential elements of the project was this idea that we pride ourselves on being a diverse nation, where everyone has these kind of, has space to be themselves, but we all contend with kind of narrow notions of kind of who we are at the end of the day, and kind of live under these clouds of assumptions about our own perception by other people. But one of the things that we're really trying to contend with in our project is, how do people within that group relate to one another and each other, and how does that affect things like the achievement gap, the discipline gap, and overrepresentation of black males in prison and so on. And one of the things that we really feel like this project has a potential to do is affect a major thing called implicit bias, which was a major factor in the Trayvon Martin case, where somebody sees a young black male in a hood and makes a whole host of assumptions about that person. And that affects the way that many African Americans navigate the world. And African American men especially benefit from people seeing more whole and diverse representations of who they are, and rather than seeing one or two or three people, actually seeing how each of them is a representation of only themselves as individuals.
So this is an illustration of the methodology. Just to make it clear, what we really do, as naive as it seems, is we simply touch black men wherever we are. There are instances where we saw black men who looked interesting. There was a guy in Chicago who had a Guardian Angels hat on. The very first man in our project was someone sitting next to me on the plane that I said, this project is something that gives black men who have questions about other black men a chance to ask those questions and get answers. And so we would simply go around and we'd say, do you have a question you'd want to ask another black man you feel very different from? And surprisingly, black men, no matter where we were, said, sure, I have a question. And so they would sit in front of our little makeshift studio. You can see me here setting up lights around this person. And we simply give them a chance to ask the question. So the questions come spontaneously from these people. And then you can imagine that once you build a critical mass of these really powerful questions, and one of the things, as Hank said, is that this is perceived as an opportunity by the men in it to really reach inside of their own lives and be reflective about what do they think defines a difference between them and somebody else. You can imagine how different the project would be, what a different dynamic it would be if we said, do you have a question for someone that you admire? What you would get is a very, very different process. And this man was a librarian in the museum where we were appearing. And
Birmingham, Alabama.
And because we had no idea what the men were going to ask, it was really remarkable. So this is a good example.
You know, I wonder, black man, are you really ready for freedom? And if not, what will it take for you to want and need this freedom?
So you can imagine that once you have these questions, you are kind of assigned by the nature of the project to try to find a place to get a poignant answer. Because this question related to freedom, one of the things that a lot of the issues that came up dealt with was the issue of the behavior of black men, and so we knew that we needed to go to prisons if that was possible. I got the opportunity to teach meditation at the county jail in San Francisco. The administration there became comfortable enough with me to allow us to bring in cameras and lights, and so we presented that question in video form to this man, and here's his answer.
Am I ready for freedom? And what would it take for me to want that freedom? First, I would have to stop and ask myself, and I would have to go, that's a tough question. Because freedom to me is a mind state, you know, because you got some people that's not in jail, that's not free. You know, you got people that's in prison, in dysfunctional relationships. You got people that's in prison with jobs, they work 9 to 5 that they don't like. Some people are in prison with alcohol and drug abuse. So I would have to really ask myself what's in prison in me. And what's been in prison in me is my self-esteem, my lack of self-esteem. My lack of self-esteem has led me to commit crime, to hurt people, to manipulate people, right? Because if I love myself, there's no way I could walk outside this room and punch somebody if I'm esteemed within myself. So to be free to me would have to be, I would have to change. You know, so in order for me to grow, I'd have to change, because if change is necessary for growth, in order for me to grow, I would have to adapt the mentality that something has got to change in me. I have to change my mind state. I would have to change the way I talk. I have to change the people I interact with. That would be free.
So one of the things that's so fascinating to me, actually having been in the room with Chris and Bayete when we showed this question, that was his immediate 3 seconds later response to seeing that image on screen. And I think watching some of your faces here, you're experiencing that feeling that we feel like really works for Question Bridges. Like, how else were we going to get someone to give that authentic a response? Or like, if you walked up on the street corner, like, you know, what is it, you know, ask them that freedom question, you know, do you really feel free? Then, like, is that what is he going to say? And so, or you go to them jail, whatever. And I think that potency for the project was something that really got us through the doors, and things like the Bay Area Video Coalition's Producers Institute. We also did Sundance, where we met Eric Doversberger, who works here at Google, and Sundance New Frontier Story Lab with Bayete and Kamal Sinclair. We kind of we're at BayVac. This is Kamal kind of being kind of very efficient with our ideas, and started to think about how all the ways our project could work. And initially we thought about doing a documentary, and as we started brainstorming, the documentary kind of fell to like 5th place among the ways that the project could grow. So we thought about the art installation. There's a website that we're working on, and then Kamal, Chris, and Bayete put together a curriculum that is being used and piloted in 9th through 12th grade classes in the Bay Area and also in New York, and then these community events that we've been doing. And then hopefully eventually we'll have the chance to do the documentary. But we approached Rene de Guzman and also from the Oakland Museum and also the Brooklyn Museum about this idea of having simultaneous launch of the installation. And we showed them this kind of 3D animation of how we thought the installation might work. Sorry.
When I hear a black person say, that's all fucking bullshit. Lack of a historical understanding of the time.
What is so cool about some crack? Because someone told me that how different
connotation.
Yeah, so much, so many of you using the racial slur, and you know what word I'm talking about. It's very serious. We have to stop using it. Why don't you stop?
I think it's bullshit that black people can't say nigga. I love saying nigga, and I think it's fantastic. First of all, it's one of the most beautiful words to use in the English language because it can express so much like the word fuck. The other thing about it is that you can't give white people magic power over us with a word. You know, like if we stop saying a word because white people use it poorly, that's an absurdity, and it also gives them much more power than they would have if we just used the word like freely and enjoyed ourselves with it. We have much bigger issues.
I think it's an ignorant statement. I refuse to use it myself, and I've heard the argument that by saying it in popular culture, we're desensitizing the effect of this word. I think that's foolish, and it just blows me away when I hear people who are not even black now, like other minorities who are around black people, when they say this, they have no idea of the historical significance in this word, and I think they're showing their own ignorance by continuing to say this word in public.
For myself, among friends and people I've known for a long time, and we understand each other, or I feel we understand each other, we can use that, use the N-word. That's the way and then I hate to hear people when they say you shouldn't use the word in any setting, as if no one ever discusses that other groups, racial groups, do the same thing. They use the word among Italians, Polish, Irish. I've heard them say it among themselves. They call each other Dago, Pola, Guinea, Mick, but you understand that you can't use that word in their group and how it would be taken. So it's a little different. It depends on what setting you're in and who's using the word.
So what you've seen here is a CGI that we put together to help us think through how do we deliver this content. I mean, what we've gathered became so precious, and one of the things that you saw on this slide was the dynamic of a powerful question letting loose so many different answers, and we realized what we needed to do was honor all of those answers and give people a chance to feel as if they were surrounded by these black men in almost a sacred space. That's why they're organized on 5 pillars in kind of an arc, so you have a chance to sort of be embraced by the people that are talking. And what we wanted the people who were witnessing this to feel like is as if they were sort of invisible. They were privileged witnesses to this very intense conversation that has many dimensions. Because what you see from this little sequence is that a question like something like the word nigger generates so many different answers. There's no general agreement among black men about how to relate to that word. So one of the things that we felt like we needed to do in putting together the installation was honor that diversity of values and give people a chance to see that there's an internal debate that goes on within the greater consciousness of black men about all these issues. And the range of issues that this project automatically generated was really it was inspiring. As she said earlier, we spent 4 years traveling to a dozen cities around the country, sampling black men talking. And one of the things that always surprised us was, as Hank said, how prepared these men were to answer those questions. So it gave us a chance to think sort of conceptually, like, why was that possible? It's certainly a pressurized situation when you invite a stranger into a studio, you put a camera and a monitor in front of them and give them a chance to talk. Why does it work? And one of the things that we realized is that internally, marginalized people, and maybe all of us, are sort of rehearsing answers to questions that float over us like a cloud. And so what we're doing is sort of tapping into this question cloud that people are looking for opportunities to share. So that's what Question Bridge is more than anything else. It's a vehicle for the sort of transference of inner truths that are always there. And when you tap into a demographic that really is underrepresented, one of the things that we've thought about is that it's very much like giving Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man a place to speak. That's what this is about. Because if you look at black men all around you, they have so much to tell us about survival, about accountability, about consequences. One of the things that it was vital for us to do was not populate this project with too many well-known black men. We wanted it to feel as if you could walk out and encounter any black man in the world, and that person could be part of Question Bridge. So we had this idea, and then the question is, what do you do with it? And once it sort of formulated itself into the idea of the installation, we were very lucky to get an opportunity to do a presentation at the Brooklyn Museum. And much to our surprise, they embraced it almost immediately. And not only were they willing to commit a 6-month installation of the show, but it's actually still there. But then they encountered Renee de Guzman, who's sitting here with us, and Renee and Charles Desmarais decided to make a bi-coastal representation of it. So here's this representation of black men talking on both sides of the country. We also, the next slide will show that we opened this year at New Frontier at Sundance, which was a real honor. We also simultaneously opened at the Utah Museum of Contemporary Art, and the City of Atlanta committed the Chastain Gallery to a single-channel version. We'll be showing you a version of that shortly. The way the 5-channel dynamics looks when you condense it down to one channel. These are installations, shots of the way it appears in Brooklyn. Every space, of course, has to treat it a little bit differently. At Oakland, for example, it's divided between 2 galleries. And what it amounts to is a 3-hour, 5-channel, high-definition experience. You can imagine for us going to Sundance what it was like to sort of be there as directors of this high-definition 3-hour movie. And the project, as Hank said, organically needed to represent itself in many different ways. And so one of the things we did was collaborate with Innovent, a software development and web design company, and we created this mobile app because what we realized is that it was really important for us to get this experience of being in the presence of a black man asking you a question out into the world. And so what the kiosk experience in the museums allows you to do is have pre-selected questions presented to you. You get to identify yourself in terms of your demographic, also in terms of a few keywords that you think define your sense of who you are. And then you get to use the webcam built into the kiosk, into the iPad, to actually answer that question and present that back to the world.
And this is yet another Google employee, Bernardo Fernandez, who was one of the first people to come and test out the mobile app and was actually impressed by it, which we felt like was a major achievement. And so what was really exciting about actually having the opening is seeing on like literally dozens of people kind of crowd around this installation. And the fact that it is a 5-channel, 3-hour installation is something we never expected people to engage in on that level. We tried to make it something that people could exit or enter at any point. We also made the education curriculum available online so people can download it and engage with their family, friends, but also, of course, students.
We should say that Kamal Sinclair, our collaborator, was really key in developing that curriculum.
Yeah. And then these ideas of one of the things that Chris really was most moved by early on was this idea of kind of this intergenerational exchange. And I mean, I witnessed that very much watching him and Bayete relate, especially. I don't know, me and Bayete are the same age, but there's like this really amazing kind of way in which as black men, they have such different perspectives about things, and kind of have the three of us having these kind of different, couldn't agree on what issues are central to black male identity while we're doing this project about black males. And so Chris had this idea of, why don't we actually see what it's like to put this format to test in the public, you know, where we have this intergenerational exchange, where we had these things called blueprint roundtables.
I'm trying to figure out the parameters of blackness.
Sorry. I don't even know how that got in there. Oops. It was going so smoothly. Let me see if I can skip that, that particular clip. So this is a question that inspired the Blueprint Roundtables. We had our last one on Saturday in Oakland, which was supposed to be just a 2-hour exchange, which wound up being this 4-hour conversation with hundreds of people that stayed. And the one at the Oakland Museum was very moving. I got teary-eyed, and it was pretty amazing. But this is the question that inspired that.
I love older people. I respect older people. I live for older people. because I come from somebody that's older. So first and foremost, I want to say we did do wrong. We did things, you know, we stepped on ourselves. We did a lot of wrong things, you know. And for the most part is I don't respect how, you know, you look down on us, you treat us a certain type of way. It's all right. We're gonna do it for the next 30 years. We're gonna show y'all, we're gonna do what we gotta do. But my whole thing is, my first and foremost, I should have just said this from the beginning, but I'm gonna sum it up with this. Why didn't y'all leave us the blueprint? Peace.
I suppose some of us, myself included, feel like we did leave a blueprint. If you had experienced the euphoria that we felt during the 60s, when we would see one another on the corner, and there wasn't no such thing as you had to throw up some kind of gang sign. When you saw other black people, you went like this, they went like that, everything was fine. That's not the way it is now. I thought, me as an individual, because I can't speak to other people, I thought there would be a continuum. I thought if I raised my children a certain way, that things would stay that way. I thought that we were progressing. I underestimated the seriousness of our enemies. I underestimated them, that so much time and effort would be spent in dismantling those things that brought about self-esteem, those things that brought about self-love, those things that brought about respect for one another. A great deal of time and energy was spent dismantling that by our enemies. And it is our fault that we did not see that for what it was and combat it more thoroughly.
I think maybe we did leave you a blueprint. And yet, we too were so busy trying to survive that we were not as organized and disciplined as maybe we should have been. But speaking from the platform of Martin Luther King's civil rights movement, Martin Luther King never had more than 100 people on his staff, and that was only for 1 or 2 movements. He never had more than $500,000 a year to try to change the world. None of us had a blueprint. But what he taught us to do, and what we learned from Gandhi in India, was that we could find our own way by standing up for the truth.
Well, after the civil rights movement of the 60s proved to be very, very successful, I think blacks felt that we have crossed the threshold and it's easy going from here on in. But the worst was yet to come. I kind of think we thought that the waves would continue to roll, and we did drop the ball, only to find out later that other people were making plans and were putting certain kinds of Negroes in heads of organizations and paying them well. And they became the spokespersons for black people. And they became the protectors of the plantation, being paid by white people.
I think that we left you the blueprint, we just didn't tell you where it was. It's there. But we didn't just show it to you or lay it out. You had to look at us and see what we were doing to find out how to go about that blueprint. You see, some things can't be explained to you. Some things you gotta look at a person and then you gotta see what it is that they're doing. The blueprint is you get an education. You don't just be in the middle of the road. You don't try to be with the kids who don't do well. You try to be the best, okay? You do as good as you can, no matter how angry people become when you're really good. You know what? Success is not easy. It is not. If it was, everybody would be successful. It takes time. It takes hard work. And just everybody is not geared for hard work. Some people want it overnight, and it's not going to happen that way. And so what you have to do is, we old people, we've laid the groundwork for you. We've already put the blueprint out there. Now, you might not like that blueprint. You might want to alter it in some way. And you can. But if you alter it and it's not for the better, you will not achieve what us old folks have achieved.
So again, you can imagine, you can see that what we're doing is we're telling a story. We're allowing the men in this project to tell the story. And in this case, there was a hunger for an intergenerational exchange that doesn't happen when the men don't have fathers and grandfathers who are there. And so this project sort of becomes a vehicle for talking between generations.
I'm trying to figure out the parameters of blackness. I know the stuff that I'm supposed to believe and read and listen to and look at if I'm definitely gonna be black, like in the heart of blackness. But I keep wondering, suppose, for example, I prefer to listen to classical music, or I prefer to travel to places where there are no black people, or I like Picasso, maybe even more than I like Romare Bearden or Jacob Lawrence. Am I still black? Or exactly how do we figure out where these boundaries are and what we're supposed to be if we want to be a part of this community?
Oh my God, I am so fucking sick of regulatory blackness, because this is what your question is all about. What do I have to do in order to prove my blackness? Let me just answer your question like this. I know I come from a rich tradition that is diverse as it is deep. I don't have to do particular things in order to prove that I'm more or less black. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. And I think it makes us schizophrenic. I think it makes us crazy to run around thinking, well, if I don't listen to hip hop, I'm not black enough. If I go to rock concerts or something like that, I'm being white. If I do this or if I do that, I'm not seen as being a full black person in the black community. Fuck that shit. I'm black, I'm proud of that, and I don't have to adhere to all these cultural norms in order to prove that.
See, I always believed in dealing with different type of people. I never was set and stuck in like one type of box. So basically the answer for that is like, you can do basically whatever you want to do. Just always remember that everything comes from black. You know what I mean? So it's like you can deal with whoever you want to deal with. I like white people. I got a few white friends. You know what I mean? And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if it's your choice to do what you want to do. But just always remember, try to rub off and always try to take what you need to take from certain people and do what you need to do with it and create whatever you want to create, brother.
Yes. This is one of the kind of more compelling exchanges that we came across, which I think when we heard this question, that was the first point where I was like, okay, I think we've reached our stopping point. Whereas Chris decided to forge forward, and you kind of see where it led us.
All right, cool. So this is my question, man. I got a lot of brothers in the hood, listen to a lot of rap music, and I just want to know what is so cool about selling crack. Can someone tell me that? I mean, why is that so glorified in the music and in the things that we talk about?
Well, as far as for myself, when I came up, crack was a quick way for a black man to make $1 million. I'm 40 years old. In '85, when the crack scene hit, I was 15, 16 years old, watching two parents work dog hard to death and watching the dude next door who was selling crack riding big cars. To me, I thought that was cool. And once I learned how to sell crack and learned how to acquire my own money and still learn how to have things white folks was having and get up when I want to get up, to me, that was cool.
To me, crack is whack, but to most people, I think to most people my age and where I come from, my community, I think it's cool because you can make money, you could really just sit on your butt and, make some money. Don't really have to do nothing except you have to watch for cops and you'll be paranoid and everything.
Ain't nothing cool about being out there, taking life chances, sitting on that quarter, not knowing what's going to occur at any given minute, trying to get some, material possession. Man, ain't nothing cool out there, man. Man, oppressing my people because I'm hurt people. Ain't nothing cool with that. Ain't nothing cool with me selling crack to my mama, taking the Christmas toys away from my little siblings because I'm charging my mama $100 for a dime on credit.
I believe selling drugs is just as much of an addiction as the person that's using it. You see that money, you get a high.
I got an answer for everything I do, for my actions and inactions. And I've been a part of bullshit And I didn't see it on the streets. I was blinded to what? That delusion of grandeur. Thinking that I'm greater than life itself, and I wasn't. You feel me? I'm responsible for hella hurt that I didn't cause people life, broken families out there. I'm responsible for children that's incarcerated right now as we speak. I'm incarcerated for death out there based on me selling crack because I never know what a person had to do to go get it. You feel me? I'm responsible for that shit. Ain't nothing cool with that. And at nighttime, I sit and I sleep in my cell, man, and I sit there lost in thoughts, man. Damn! I'm responsible for a lot of things. And, man, ain't no answer for that, man. He's just sitting here with the bullshit I created, man. To sit here and watch my people sit here and cry. But I'm responsible for everything. I hold myself accountable. Shit. But I've been committed suicide a long time ago when I was a part of that bullshit. Now I claim my life. And I'm a part of something that's greater. And that's the solution.
So, again, you can imagine what it was like to be in the presence of that kind of disclosure that came spontaneously from this man, just given an opportunity to do it. The same thing is true in this example here. We had no idea what this man was going to ask.
This may seem like a silly question, but I want to know, am I the only one who has problem eating chicken, watermelon, and bananas in front of white people?
I don't have a problem with it, period.
No, I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't even eat watermelon because of the connotations that it has around black people. But I will eat some chicken though.
I never heard the bananas one. I never heard bananas, really? Huh.
I don't know if you're the only one, but it is not a problem for me to eat whatever I want to eat in front of anybody.
You're not the only one, brother, to be honest. Every time, I still eat chicken. I eat a lot of watermelon, and I love bananas. But I'm always looking over my shoulder, wherever I'm at, seeing who's watching me eat this watermelon and this piece of chicken and this banana, always. You're not the only one.
No, I know plenty of African Americans who, as a rule, will not eat watermelon in front of white folks. Now, for me, I have difficulty relating to the question only in the sense that I've never ever liked watermelon and I don't eat meat. So I don't find myself in the situation where chicken and watermelon comes to a head. But I do know that there are times where you feel like you are the stereotype because, you know, if they say, hey, do you want to go play some basketball? And of course I love basketball. I played it every single day. But there's a part of me that wants to say, no, I don't want to play any basketball. What makes you think I want to play basketball? But in those moments, I think we have to be honest with ourselves and just know that there are some things that are true. Yes. You know, we like chicken, we like watermelon, and there's nothing wrong with that, and it's nothing to be ashamed of.
It's not a silly question, brother. My family sells 50,000 pounds of watermelons every week in the streets of South Chicago, Milwaukee, and Gary, Indiana, and have been since 1953, and we're okay with that. And by the way, I like fried chicken. In fact, I'm gonna make some tonight.
I don't know if you're the only one ashamed. I'm not ashamed, but I do give chicken a second thought sometimes, even when I mention it. But I always pass it off as sort of like in a jokey joke way, because I do love chicken. Watermelon, I don't eat watermelon so much, so I'm not really so much ashamed of it. Bananas, I hadn't thought about bananas because I always think about a banana because I'm gay in a sexual way. So when I peel a banana, I'm always self-conscious in front of anybody just because it's sexuality, but not because of race.
I think really that question leads to a deeper question. Why are we so concerned with what they think about us? That's what the real question is. I don't really care. I know somewhere in there I do care, but in my consciousness and what I'm going to say is, I don't really care what they think. I don't need their approval in order for me to go ahead and be me, or in order for me to do my job, or in order for me to be who I'm going to be. I don't need their approval. I don't need their job. None of that. I think it's really important that we stop worrying about what they think and start worrying about what you think about yourself and maybe what the little black kid next door to you thinks about you. Fuck some white person thinking what they think about you eating a watermelon or anything else, your shoes, your jacket, your hat backwards. I don't go with the sagging pants, but, whatever you're doing, it's because it's your cultural identity or your food or whatever. What they think about is not really important.
So this is, and that exchange between this heaviness of the crack question and the kind of I think we have so many other, my favorite answer to that particular question isn't even in here because there's so many different kind of answers, and what we found is everyone is an expert about something, and everyone, like, when we found this guy who says, my family's sold watermelons for 60 years, these are the kind of things that lie beneath in every one of us in this room. There's all these things that we don't ever think about how they relate to how we relate to one another. And I'm going to show one more clip. I'm going to skip this one, and then show you this clip, and then we're going to pretty soon wrap up.
I have a question. How do you know when you become a man?
Wow, that's a deep question for such a young person. How would you know when you become a man? Well, basically, responsibility. You're able to take on, assume responsibility, hold fast to your commitments to yourself first, your family, and the community in which you live in. And if you can do those things, you're on your way to manhood.
The question of when you become a man, you're born a man. When you become of age may be a more relevant question, but some of us become of age many times throughout the course of their lives. I thought that I was a man at 21, ready to write memoirs of all my experience, And so I don't know how many times that I thought I knew the answer to everything. And so I'm here again, thinking that I know it all, but you'll know.
Young man, there are a couple of different factors that make you a man. You have to be financially stable. That's one. You definitely got to have your own place, own roof over your head. You have to go to college. It's for all the young men out there. I mean, that's one step that you got to take in order to lead to financial stability. And you have to be taking care of yourself and buy your mama a house. Then you become a man.
I think sometimes I still try to answer that question, whether or not I've become a man. I grew up in a single family home without a father, but I'm the youngest of 7, and I have 6 older brothers who taught me about being a man. And so part of that is trying to be responsible to my family and to my loved ones, and being a responsible citizen. But I think each of us have to find our own way to that path of what it means to be a man.
Young brother, I knew I became a man when I had to take on certain responsibilities and obligations, family, community, and otherwise.
Oh, that's a fine question there. I think that one of the mistakes that we often make is thinking that the first time that we're intimate with a woman, that now we're a man. In traditional societies, in order for boys to go into manhood, they had to go through certain rituals which included them being prepared to fit whatever role they had in that society. If they were hunters, they learned how to hunt. If they were farmers, they learned how to farm. If they were fishermen, they learned how to fish. And when they were through with everything that prepared them to be a responsible member of that particular community, in that particular town, or village, or tribe, or whatever, they were given visible symbols of that completion. A scar on the face, a type of clothing, a type of jewelry, or something that they wore, that a woman could look at them and say, well, this person is now a man.
Youngin, who? I'm still trying to figure that out myself. It's tough. It's really tough. For me, I really don't know when that's gonna happen. Right now, I'm just trying to take these strides in what society thinks a man is, you know, going to school and getting a job and being able to stand on my 2 feet. It's gonna be a difficult road, but it's probably gonna be well worth it.
So, so we have all of this content. We have actually more than 1,500. We have almost 2,000 now question and answer exchanges. And so we worked with Ryan Alexiev, who's here also today, to kind of start to, he also designed our iPad app, and we have a beta form of a mobile app that we did with Innovent. But the main thing that we're really hoping to get to as engagement strategies are these posters that we can distribute and allow people using QR codes and NFC tags to actually respond to the questions that from their mobile devices, but also to log onto our website, which we hope someday soon will be user generated, where you can kind of look at questions, upload your own answers to questions, and then have these different ways of searching question and answers through this integrated identity map, as well as a map based on what kind of values people are kind of representing through locations and things like that. And then lastly, just using this slide of one of Bayete Ross Smith, one of our collaborators' work, to show kind of how, like, hopefully our ultimate goal of the question bridge will lead to showing that within each individual is a much more complex and diverse human being, that no one can be deduced to a simple demographic stereotype or notion.
One of the ways that we symbolize that is by emphasizing that the title of this project is Question Bridge: Black Males. The colon is really important. There really is no reason why this methodology couldn't be applied to any demographic, and that's one of our aspirations.
Especially when it's not even race or gender specific. Question Bridge Google.
So thank you.
Thank you all.
So your project is a fascinating amalgam of psychology and sociology and politics and art, and I guess my question is about the artistic and the maybe political part or anthropological part. I don't know, but as the people doing the selection, curation of this material and deciding how to present it and which parts of it to present to the people who interact with it and become a part of the project in that way, or to the people who maybe go to the Oakland Museum and view the installation. Obviously, you bring some biases very openly to your selection process, and you've articulated some of them, like there's value in the diversity of this demographic. And I'm sure you probably have a very conscious awareness of the role that your biases play in the selection of this stuff, and which parts are you going to emphasize, which are the interesting parts. I'm interested in your comments about how do you decide which are the right biases to apply in choosing the material, and which ones are the ones that you might try to suppress.
Well, I think the essence of that goes back to the fact that, as I said at the beginning of this, this is a project that, even though it does share methodologies and values that anthropology, sociology, psychology does, journalism, for example, all of those are pursuits of truth. But because it's a work of art, what drives all those decisions are, first of all, the initial experience that we feel like we want to convey. I mean, that's primary. And because the initial experience of this is our experience as black men, our understanding of how complex we are as individuals, our experience of the fact that because we are marginalized. I use the notion of us being opaque, that the mission of this as artists is to have visibility for those black men. And so what we want to do is listen very carefully to the stories that emerge and then sense where there's an implied narrative arc, like where the meaning lies by the juxtaposition and sequencing of these questions. And you can see that in the sequences. And so you make those decisions intuitively, hoping that you're creating an experience that becomes an exchange between us as artists and you as viewers. And then you use formal strategies. Of course, the framing, and I talked a little bit about the way the installation is designed to try to be inclusive. I mean, those are all things that are driven by our sensibilities as artists. And then we hope that that experience is transformative for the viewers.
Well, I agree with him to a degree. I think one of the things he did mention, because being diplomatic, is we argue because it's a collaboration, and it's a collaboration in the making of a 5-channel 3-hour project. We have like 6 or 7 voices involved, and not all of them are African American males, and we each have different subjects, different people who like I love this person or I love that person, and I think part of the reason that it becomes more complex is because no one's single vision is defining this conversation. We're very sensitive to that aspect. The only reason it's even 3 hours is because we didn't have time to make it 6 hours, because we have over 85 hours of like really great content. And I think, so if Chris was left his own devices, he would make one thing. If I make it one thing. And I think this project, one of the things that it really tries to challenge is this idea of an authoritative narrative voice that within especially social sciences says, I have an expert from the outside that's going to come in and apply these generic kind of format to finding out information about a certain group. Whereas our project is really organic, where it's like, Chris will walk up to somebody on the street, or Bayete will call somebody in another place, or Kamal will say, oh, everybody happens to know some black man somewhere. So the diversity is implied in the way that we find people. And then, we show them questions, and frequently Chris asked them to pose a question, and then they would give a question, and that the bias is in me, Chris, and Bayete's selection of what questions to show them based off of the question they asked.
Mm-hmm. But let me just give a further answer. What emerged, as Hank said, was in a sense a synthesis of 2 key themes. One of them had to do with healing. And so you heard me talk about how the project was, for me, a chance to try to create a connection between these different segments of the African American community that, for historical reasons, were separated and needed each other, so that one has a sense of empowerment and freedom to move through opportunities in the greater world. Others have a strong sense of community and belonging to each other. And so wanting to heal that. So healing became one theme, and that could have been the driving force behind the whole project. But another one emerged that was really important, and that is representation. The opportunity of black men through this format to speak and define themselves without an author telling them what to say and how to say it. And so those dynamics played out even within a particular sequence. And that's what gives it such depth and richness, I think.
Thank you.
I just got a quick question. Do you guys ever film reactions when they hear like 15 different answers, like how their opinions might have changed after that?
You want to take that?
Well, sure. I mean, as you can imagine, a part of the process entails filming the person while they're listening to the question. Sometimes that's really important. And the way that would work, this is something that Hank and I sort of did telepathically. But he would give me a cue that this question is going to prompt a response, and I would be really careful to capture that. And then you could see how we use some of that footage, the headers, in and out of a question, as a way to create a dynamic of exchange in the installation. And so, yeah, we definitely capture as much of that as possible. But one technical thing, working in digital video, you become very mindful of disk space, and so we sometimes would see things running out, so we were more conservative about what we captured. But yeah, that was part of it. That was important.
I mean, but also one of the factors of Chris's original Question Bridge project that I wish we had the time to do was to take certain, and Chris especially has a mission to go back and find the man who asked the peaceful question and show him the range of answers we got to that question. And I think it's called basically a rebuttal that was a part that you did.
Closing the loop.
Closing the loop.
Yeah.
In the original Question Bridge project that we haven't really had a chance because we have to track down these 160 men, but we will.
Well, on that note, thank you very much for coming to Google today.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.